Hello, 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 family. How are you today? My name is Quanisha Johnson. I am a licensed counselor and educator, and I am here to discuss with you a new topic. We are on theme five and session three of theme five, and all of the topics have been important every single month, every single week. But we are in a place where we are looking at a different area relating to unpacking racial identity and trauma. And so let's get it started. Let's talk about theme five, section three topic. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let's get the party started. And as I stated to you before, we are looking at racial identity and trauma. And so our topic specifically today under that umbrella is going to be a conversation about working while Black. I'll repeat that again, working while Black. And so ultimately, I know most of us have heard the term, especially in light of all of the incidences of, Black people being pulled over in their cars, being assaulted, being killed. And so we're very familiar with the idea of, we say working while, and you fill in the blank, like driving while Black or working while Black, just to say it's normal everyday things that we all are entitled to be able to do freely without any type of consequence. And so driving is a day-to-day activity. So when you hear the phrase driving while Black, I'm a Black person and I have the right to drive my car to whatever location. And the same thing goes with work. And so we're going to just touch upon just what it means to work and be a Black person. It's a very, very different experience, especially when you are working and you are specifically in an environment where no one looks like you. So what does it mean to be a Black professional in a predominantly white workplace? It means a lot. The dynamics are challenging. It means different things for different people. But once again, talking about working while Black, work is something that we all have to do, at some point, even when there's breaks for having children, raising families, at some point people have work, whether it's self-employment, working at, working for a business, whether it's corporate America in a school. But the dynamics are different when you are a Black professional, someone Black working, and you are in a setting where no one looks like you. It's a very different experience. Not to minimize it, I've always thought of it as, because I've had this experience in many places in my life, academically as well, not just in the workplace, but academically. It feels as though I always say there used to be a time, and probably pre-COVID, and I don't know if they still were doing it right before COVID, but people would have a party and they would choose attire. Let's say, for example, it's an all white party. So to enter this party, you have to come in and be dressed in all white. And so if you were to be going to an all white party and you walked into the party, but you were dressed in all turquoise. And so you're the only person there in all turquoise to an all white party, still there to be entertained, to have a good time, like everyone else there dressed in all white, but you have on all turquoise. So what are your alternatives? And so ultimately, I always think of myself in those settings where no one looks like me. It feels as though I enter into the all white party or whatever the attire color is, and I have the wrong color on. That's what it feels like. And so ultimately, it means something different to be a Black professional in a predominantly white workplace. So what does it mean? First, the preparation process is very, very different. And there's a mental and physical prep work once you are employed wherever you are in your workplace and no one there where there is a lack of diversity, racially, culturally. You have to do a different type of mental preparation, and as well as physical prep. And what I mean by physical prep is even how you dress, asking yourself, what will I wear? What do I need to look like today? Because my outfit needs to say XYZ to fit into this environment. So you're prepping differently. So some of the things that your white fellow employees may be able to come into a setting and not think about, you're thinking about, right? There's a mental prep work is different. You're thinking about, what do I wear? How will I wear my hair? I even think about the interview process before you're even securing your position. And the many times, and I'm sure whoever is listening to this can relate at some point in their life, deciding how you will wear your hair. Now, for many years, I have worn my hair in a natural state. And then I have, before being self-employed, went on interviews because I worked at different places. I worked at schools, colleges, in the community. And I had to make that decision about my hair. Even though I love wearing my hair natural, I had to do that mental preparation work. And I'm thinking, if I wore my hair in its natural state, will I be seen the way that I want to be seen? Will they be able to hear my answers, or will they be looking at my hair? And so ultimately, although, like I said, I love my hair and I embrace who I am, these are questions we often ask ourselves. What are we going to wear? How is it going to look? How does it fit our bodies? Right? Just all of these questions. So there's mental and physical prep work, even in the preparation process of interviewing. And when you get into the job, if I decide to, on a dress down day in a professional environment, wear a T-shirt that says something historical, that connects to my people, to my ancestors, and will I get questions about it? What will people say if I decide to wear an African print? Things that, if you were going into an environment where people look like you, absolutely, there are cultural differences. If we think about what the word culture even means, everyone's not going to understand all of our culture, how we see culture. Culture is different amongst race, amongst families. And so it's not just all Black people, we're monolithic, we think this, we act this way. It's not true. But just when you're in a predominantly white workspace, it looks different. The mental and physical prep work is not the same. There's a level of what is called emotional dissonance. And I want to talk about what that is. It's a feeling of uneasiness when an emotional experience threatens your identity. So the idea of you have an emotional experience and it doesn't feel good because it threatens who you are. Employees feel this when they have to often fake emotions. In many cases, when we are going into environments that are not diverse, culturally diverse, racially diverse, where we feel as though we are the only ones, we don't fit in, we're judged differently, there is an emotion you have to go in with. I know of individuals who have to literally have had to sit in their vehicles, preparing to enter their workplace, emotionally preparing to go into a place where they feel that they're not accepted. And so just thinking about that prep work, that emotional labor that takes place, so that you can go and feed your family. And so when we have emotional dissonance, it's that feeling, that emotional experience. I'm going to pretend, so I'm going to sit in my car and I'm going to be, so I have to take everything in me to go in because they're expecting me to walk in and smile. That's the expectation. I can't even go in just with a flat affect. I have to go in because the expectation may be to smile. Or if I don't smile, I may appear to have been angry. And so ultimately, it's that feeling when what you're being asked to do, how you're feeling doesn't go along with how you see yourself and who you are. And then you have to you're pretending. And of course, in all employment, there is a level of emotional regulation, right? There are days where you don't feel yourself, something's happened in your personal life, and to do your job, you have to go into a setting, and you can't be with a client or a customer and allow those personal things to impact the work, right? But ultimately, it's when you're faking it, when you're in these environments, when you're feeling as though you are looked at differently, you're judged, you don't have access to the same opportunities, it hits very different. When you are going in and you're doing this, it's exhausting. Faking it every single day, when there's that emotional dissonance, that feeling of an uneasiness threatening who you are daily, especially if you go to work 5 or 6 days a week, it is taxing on you mentally and emotionally, and it is exhausting. If you have to go in every day into a setting feeling a certain way, pretending to be something, to please others, to do the job, it can be exhausting. So there's that conflict that exists between the emotions that you experience and the emotions that you express. So the conflict exists with emotional dissonance, the emotions I'm actually feeling, and the ones that I have to express because I have to, because I'm working, but I'm working while Black. So this is going to look different. I have to behave different. I have to think different. The experience is different. And in many cases, just going through this procedure daily leads to job burnout. You feel burnt out. Of course, if you're working in an environment where it's predominantly white, it's not culturally diverse or racially diverse, you may have to deal with racial discrimination. I want to say to you first and foremost that any type of discrimination in your workplace is first and foremost illegal. So what I'm wanting everyone who hears the sound of my voice to do is to be very, very aware and educated on workplace etiquette, the laws, what your boss is required to do, what type of a workplace that you are afforded to when you are an employee and you sign that contract to work, the type of workplace that is afforded to you just simply because they're supposed to do it. Not because they like you, they think you're nice or cute, but because legally they have to provide that. So what I'm wanting everyone to do is when you are in a work situation, to just be mindful of the legality of work. What are the laws? What is harassment? What's discrimination? What are the laws to protect you? So just understanding any form of discrimination. So understanding what discrimination is and any form of discrimination, and we're talking about racial today because we're talking about working while Black, is illegal. It's against the law, and it's not supposed to happen at all. So we can't just go, well, it's okay. Well, there's nothing I can do about it. It's illegal. So I just want to let everyone know that the way that we fight battles is the knowledge as well. The way that we can be overcomers is being knowledgeable of what rights are given to you, and when you think a right is not a privilege, a right is a right. When you have a right to something, it belongs to you. It is not a privilege, and no one determines based upon their own perception or opinion whether or not you should receive it. So when we think about discrimination, we think about mistreatment, and we think about racial discrimination specifically is job treatment specifically based upon your race, nothing else. So that could be with the employment process itself, right? How did they hire you? What was the process in hiring? If you are in a position where you think you may have been the victim of racial discrimination, what was the firing process? Why did they fire you? Was there firing or letting you go based upon your race? Do you have an idea that may be the reason? Promotions, being in a predominantly white environment, an environment that is not racially diverse or culturally diverse, being passed up for promotions as a result of our race. So when we are working in these environments, these are things that can happen. Am I saying today that they happen in every situation? Absolutely not. But what I am saying are these are things that can happen. And so employment, being passed up for promotions, compensation and pay, receiving less pay, the pay that is not adequate to your skills and your education based upon you being a Black woman or being a Black man in your workplace. And so being discriminated upon based upon those factors and not having access to those things. Not having the access to be in, if you are in a company and you are working and you're working very hard and your goal always is to grow and whatever you do to elevate, to develop, to learn, right? In every position that we're in, that has to be a goal. But what if based upon your race, you were not given access to professional development and training, which helps you move up in the company or the organization? And so we have to sometimes deal with racial discrimination in the workplace, simply based upon what our skin looks like. This is a conversation I often have with people all of the time. Going into your workplace when you are a Black person, because we're talking today about working while Black, and the term code switching. So this phrase is not a new phrase, although, we hear it used often. I've had, like I said, many conversations with people who have felt as though they needed to do this. But this isn't a phrase that was created in 1854. And it was not, it did not directly go with the idea of Black people going into an environment and switching back and forth. But it was the idea or described the switching back and forth between different dialects or different languages. And so now in the 1970s, it became very prevalent, the idea of doing so in the Black workspaces and the academic spaces, right? You go into an environment, so it is, I have to switch between two different, and not language meaning Spanish and English, but meaning between my cultural identity, how I speak, how I carry myself. It looks different when I go into these all white environments. And so for us, it is performative expression that has not only helped some of us thrive in mainstream culture, but it has, and this article, this information came from an article in magazine.org, just this phrase right here, that it not only helps us thrive, that word thrive, grow, develop in mainstream, but for many of us, it helps us to simply survive. And so ultimately, just thinking of the idea of this is who I am, once again, this is who I am. This is my culture. This is how I carry myself. This is how I speak. And feeling as though I have to perform, not just to thrive, to grow, to develop, but to simply survive. Once again, just like with emotional dissonance, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. Changing who you are to fit a mold or feel as though you have to do so to fit within an environment to survive. And even thinking about survival, I think with survival, our work is connected to survival. And so if I feel as though I cannot work, if I don't conform or change this up or switch back and forth. So this is the me that I can be, and I feel comfortable in my skin and who I am. But when I'm in this work environment, I have to be mindful of every word I use, how what I say, how I say it, because I want my job. And the thoughts, the mental preparation, as I said earlier, that you have to do because you want to keep your job, because your job is connected to your survival. And so ultimately, the code switching is exhausting. And there have been so many jokes about it, even though it's serious because it's emotionally taxing. It's exhausting to have to do so, but it's a form of not just thriving in mainstream culture, but survival. This is how I'm going to make it because this is the person they want to see. This is the person that they want to hear. This is the voice that's not threatening. And so ultimately, it's just exhausting for us. So when you're working while Black, it's not just, we can't just take off the while Black part and go, well, they're just working. No, it comes along with a lot of emotional, mental, and physical work, in addition to whatever the job position is. And so microaggressions are something that I cannot go through this whole conversation today without talking about microaggressions. So microaggressions are brief verbal, behavioral, and environmental behaviors that communicate hostile or negative slights or insults. So they are brief. So someone may think because they're short that they're not impactful. Those short verbal behaviors, those short things in our environment, those brief, short, not a long time, that communication that was just someone said a sentence to you. Brief, negative, slight, insult, a slight. And so I put in parentheses unintentional because it may be intentional or unintentional. It's intentional, even though it's the whole idea of it's intent versus impact. And so ultimately, someone may say, well, I didn't mean it that way. Okay, but this was the impact. So the important part of a microaggression, that interaction, that communication, that's hostile, negative, it's a slight, it's an insult, it's brief, it was short, that it happened so fast. And sometimes you're like, did that person just say that to me? Like, really? And so I always think that if you are not saying anything productive, it's intentional. It's not, it's think before you're saying something. Is it necessary? Is it necessary to say what I'm saying? And so ultimately, with a microaggression, it's not the intent, it's the impact. We have to remember that. And that's why we can't say, oh, they were just, they just said this one sentence. It was just this one thing. What is the impact of that? Death by 1,000 cuts is what it's often known as, these microaggressions. Think about the whole idea, right? Maybe a macroaggression is this big thing, but the micro, those little cuts that eventually do kill you, they are harmful. There's a lot. Think about getting a lot of little jabs, just little cuts here, what that feels like. And they're often, they're directed towards us, towards marginalized groups already put in a category, seen a certain way, judged for who they are, and they will absolutely impact how you feel about yourself and your job, how you feel about you. It impacts, as we stated earlier, that when you go into that place and you've had the experience of microaggressions, you're in this environment where you don't feel culturally connected, it's not racially diverse, that you are entering the all white party with your turquoise on every single day. It is challenging to go in and do that mental work when you're dealing with an environment where you've experienced the microaggressions of your employer or fellow employees. I want to give you some examples. So here's a few I have down that we as Black people are familiar with, even from our personal experiences, the experiences of others, hearing it on television. So the first one I have here is, you speak so well, or he speaks so well, or she speaks so well, or they are so articulate, that a Black person, that it is just shocking. Listen to how they're speaking. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Because what's the expectation? How am I supposed to sound at my job? How am I supposed to sound? And so that's an example of a microaggression. Small, like where if someone might miss it. They may mistake it for a compliment. Oh, they're speaking well. That sounds good. No, what's the expectation? Another one I have here. If you experience any form of emotional expression, right? So I'm expressing how I feel about something. You are, at some point in your work, especially when you're passionate about it. I've worked in schools in the past, and I'm always passionate about my students. So, and I'm an advocate, because I always have felt like your mama drops you off to this place. And so we are the adults, and it is our responsibility to support and advocate. So I have always been an advocate for students. So if I felt myself advocating for a student and I was passionate, wasn't raising my voice, just passionate about, like, this child deserves a chance. What can we do? Just giving an example. Like, I know graduation is this is the adversity. I'm their counselor. This is the adversity they face. What can we do? I just really think that we're being unfair. Guess what? I say those things with passion. I'm having some expression. I see you're getting angry. That would be the response to that. So that's a microaggression. I see you're getting angry. So because I'm passionate, because I'm advocating, I'm not raising my voice. I'm being mindful of my tone. But as a Black woman, I am angry. Microaggression. I've even, just for being me or volunteering to do something. I've talked about in one of these previous videos that I love talking to parents. When I worked in the school volunteer, I said, I'll call Miss Smith. Go ahead, you're so sassy. I'm sassy because I volunteered. So those are things that could go over your head, that you can miss, but it's a microaggression, especially because I was in an environment where on my hand, I counted people that look like me. And I didn't get very far across my hand. I can count on my hand, but I didn't get to the pinky. I started at my thumb, but didn't get to the pinky. And so that's another example. In another work environment I had, here's another one, just to give you an example of what it looks like when we're working while Black, what the experience is, the dynamics are different. Being called by the wrong name because there's maybe one other Black woman there or person there. So they would not take the time to remember your name. There's two of you. And so that's a microaggression. So I had an experience, love examples, where I was in a work environment, a nonprofit organization, where there was literally one other Black woman who happens to be a friend of mine. I know her name. She's a friend of mine. She's beautiful. We don't look alike, and at all. Different heights, different everything, nothing similar. But we are Black women, and we worked for this organization. And I walked into the office, and immediately, and this is a person in a supervisory position. It was a very small organization. and I walk in and they call me my friend's name. That there was just two of us, and it needed correction because it's okay to correct. And then I say the person's name, I'm not her. And then I go to say, very respectfully, I said, she's a great person. She's beautiful, but we don't all look alike. And the woman was silent. We don't all look like each other. We're not all the same. We're not. Those are microaggressions. If you do not know my name, if you do not remember my name, just go, hey, hi, how are you? I forget names all of the time. I do, especially if I'm not in contact with the person often. My clients, I know everything about them, their names, everything. I have a rapport and relationship, but I know, on this situation, she can't know every employee, but she knew to call me the other Black person. If you do not remember, if you're not aware, the names do not sound alike, just say hello. Those are examples of microaggressions. Those are the things that you deal with. Another one is asking to shorten your name. I'm Quanisha. It's a very long name. It has a lot of letters in it. I sometimes shorten my name because I have nicknames. But someone asking you to shorten your name because they won't give your name enough respect to just clarify how to say it, that's a microaggression. I just want to give you some examples of what it looks like. Making comments about your hair, as I stated earlier, that preparation work that we have to do about our hair and will we be accepted? Shall I wear my hair like this? Making comments. I've had people comment and say to me, one comment was, oh, I love your hair and I wish I could do it's always so fun. And I wish I could do different things like that. And I don't do different things. It looks like this every day I went to my places of employment. And so I don't know the next, it literally could have stopped at, I like, your hair looks pretty. Your hair looks nice today. Because I tell women of all races, of all shades, all cultures, if they have on a nice outfit, their hair looks nice, they did something great. I'm telling you, because I like to give people compliments, but it went the next step when you start commenting on like the type of hair that I have that you wish you could do more things like if you had hair like mine. It wasn't a necessary comment. Those are microaggressions. And so ultimately, the way that we deal with them, this is so important because we go through this process of sometimes it happens so fast because it's brief. And you're like, you have to process, right? Information has to be processed, right? And so it's like, if I say something, if I respond, will it impact my job? Will they tell my supervisor? Was a comment from my supervisor? Then it's like, or if I respond, if I don't respond, will I regret it later on? Like, will I be regretful if I don't say something? So you're standing there processing. You're like, say something. You're having that internal process, like say something. Like, because if you're still standing around the person, it's like say something. And so you're having this issue, this internal dialogue with yourself, trying to figure out what to do. So see, this is just what I'm saying, all of the work on top of the work you already have to do because it's required for the job. And so ultimately just wanting to give some support on how do I address a microaggression? And so for one, making sure that you're addressing it, and we've talked about this in one of these sessions, the idea of the I statement. When I use the I statement, I am taking personal accountability for my feelings. I'm taking a personal accountability for my feelings. And so you are able to, even if you have to process for a couple of minutes, it is important to address it. Because another question that might go in your head is, if I let it go, will this happen again? Am I inviting them to do it again? Or do I need to just let them know right now? Because it's important, because I work here. And although I'm working while Black, I'm working. And my career, my job is a part of my livelihood. It's a part of my passion. It feeds my family. And so this is where I'm going to be working right now. At this time, I'm working here. And so I don't want to invite any situations to make my environment that's uncomfortable some days even more uncomfortable. So I'm going to take personal accountability. And so I'm addressing with the I statement. I feel blank, or I felt, fill in the blank. What's your emotion? What are your feelings? What are the feelings? I feel blank when you, tell them what they did. When you commented on my hair, when you commented at the meeting about how well I spoke, right? So I feel blank when you, and then the last part of that I statement is tell them what you would like. I feel when you, and then I would like. What would you like to see happen? I would like for us to have these great conversations, but I would like for you to be more mindful of things that you say in relation to anything on my body, my hair, how I speak, and to be mindful of the impact of that. So remembering, I'm approaching you with an I statement. I'm taking accountability. I'm not like, you always say something you're not supposed to say to people. Nope. Because immediately, even if they were wrong, the person goes on attack. So I'm addressing with my I statement because I'm taking the person accountability. That did not make me feel good. I'm uncomfortable. I'm already in this environment where it already feels uncomfortable, where I'm doing mental work and preparation daily because I'm different. And I know people see me as different. And so ultimately, and I'm judged because I've had the experience. And so ultimately, I'm taking accountability. I feel, fill in the blank, when you, I would like. And if that person responds, I didn't mean, nope, it's not about I mean. So it's educating people on, it's not about the intention. It's not about the intention because maybe you did not intend. It's about the impact. It's about how it made me feel. We got to focus on how that made me feel. And remember, feelings are not right or wrong. They just are. And they're not meant to live. They visit and they go. So me explaining how I feel about something, it doesn't mean that this is how I'm going to feel every day, but I need to let you know because this language, this thing you said to me, it impacts me. It makes me second guess myself. It makes me go, she's talking about my hair, or I spoke about like what is it? I'm just speaking like myself. So now I'm at home trying to really kind of dissect my like how I'm talking and like because I'm wanting to be true to myself and like, am I speaking well? I thought I was just speaking like myself. Of course, I'm speaking in a professional manner because we're in a professional setting. What was it? What was expected? What did you expect? So I'm having this whole dialogue, which is work, and it's exhausting. So just wanting you to understand what microaggressions look like and wanting everyone to take care of themselves. I'll just practice that self-care. I'll mention that again towards the end of this, and just it's a lot to deal with. So we want to make sure that we are addressing what needs to be addressed. So I wanted to just take a couple of minutes, we're talking about working while Black. And so we are not specifying, we're not saying being a Black man and working, we're saying working while Black, the challenges, right? But there are some very, very specific challenges of working and being a Black woman. And so we often in these conversations have discussed intersectionality, which was a phrase coined about 30 years ago by a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw. And basically it's the idea of those identities kind of overlapping with one another. And so we have, and it's social identity, because I'll tell you, like I've said before, race is a social construct. And so it really is a made up thing. Like it really is. So we have those social identities overlapping. So you're not only dealing with oppression if you're being oppressed based upon being Black, but you're also dealing with what it comes along with being a woman, and so on and so forth. So it could be there's multiple categories, but social identities, and they're overlapping with or interlapping with one another. And so we will be remiss to address one area and not think about what goes along with the other. So you're not just dealing with I'm working while Black, I'm working while being a Black woman which means something totally different, because there are these challenges that you face because you're dealing with the intersectionality of both. And so Black women deal with the challenge of this double identity of being a Black woman and being Black and being a woman. And I came across this article that I thought really, really spoke to what the experience was. And so the article, the title of it, and I'm going to just read, and I have here hypervisible and invisible. The article read, Hypervisible, Invisible, How to Navigate White Workplaces as a Black Woman. And the author of this article, her name is Sierra Graham. And so ultimately, I'm going to read a quote from her in this article. And she says, I've been trying to figure out this challenging dance of how to be Black, but not too Black, in predominantly white spaces my entire life. And then she goes on to also say, women have to work twice as hard as men to receive the same recognition. Black women have to work 10 times harder than both men and white women in order to simply be seen in predominantly white spaces. And so the idea of hypervisibility, right? Knowing that they're looking at you, they're looking at you. They're like, she has locks. She has natural hair. Look at her. Look at her skin tone. Look at her. So like, you're hyper visible. When you're in this predominant white space, you just are. Does it mean, am I saying that, oh, I'm in a predominantly white space, so everyone treats me poorly? Absolutely not. I would never say that. But it's the idea of hypervisibility. I know you see me and you see me different because I am different. And we can't ignore differences. That I don't see color is not, it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable at all. I want you to see me, but you feel hyper visible, like you're being looked at, right? Because if you're the only one there, if I'm going to the all white party and I have on turquoise and I'm the only one with turquoise, you are looking at me. Even if my outfit is the hottest thing out there, you're looking at me. You're noticing. You're paying attention. You might be whispering, right? So it's that hypervisibility, but yet she has hypervisible, invisible. But then you struggle to be seen to get the opportunities that you're supposed to be getting when you are a Black woman in this workplace that's predominantly white. So you are in this place where it is, I am working, as she stated, 10 times harder than both men and white women. It's a different experience. And so it's that feeling of being invisible, because you're in those two places, those two groups I'm talking about, men and white women. Where do I fall? Am I being seen? It's this double identity. And it's there's challenges within that. It's that feeling, right? These are challenges that we have to like look at that, because it is a different experience. It's a different experience working while Black. So I just want to like really look at some things that can be done, because we discussed what it means to work while Black. So I just want to take some time to offer some ways that are supportive and helpful. One thing I want everyone to be able to do, if you are in these situations in your workspace, find and create a support network. And so I think that it's so important to, outside of your workspace, and this is also for your growth and your development, is to build a network outside of work. There are so many different organizations that have a professional network that you could join, because you better believe that what you are experiencing, even some of the microaggressions I named, even when I talked about the mental and physical prep work, you may be sitting here listening to me going, that's me, that's my experience. When you build these networks outside of work, you can also connect with people with similar experiences while growing and developing professionally. There are chambers of commerce. There's African American Chamber of Commerce. There's I know I have them where I live, local NAACP chapters, they do work within the community, absolutely. But also, in addition to community work, you're just building more network of people that are like yourself, that may be more connected to you culturally, that may share your same race. Additionally, historically Black fraternities and sororities, getting with them. If you are, you may have already been a part of one of these organizations. And so they have local alumni chapters, right? And so not only are they doing work within the community, but you are connecting to other like-minded people, people with similar experiences, people who can help you build and grow professionally and personally. So I know work is so important to so many people, but just the idea of finding and creating support outside of that. And so looking for that, they're accessible, they're available all across the nation. They are. And so I think it's so important to be able to do that. Another thing is, if possible, find other types of connections at work. And so ultimately, what I've always done in the past, now working at a school, in terms of, let's say my longest work experience, where I was in a predominantly white school setting, where the children, the students were so diverse, the staff was not. And so I did have maybe one or two people who identified as people of color, BIPOC, Black. I couldn't tell you their designation specifically, but culturally we were connected. Maybe our role was different at the school. And so instead of me saying, well, like how a teacher, and I was a counselor, would say, well, let me connect with another teacher, because we can connect with teachers about teaching students. I was a counselor, and no counselor looked like me. So the two women that looked like me, I would find connection with them, although our jobs were not the same. So I would take those moments, those breaks, those times to go by their desk during my lunch and just have a conversation about a show that I know, I watch, or something that I know that we could relate to, right, culturally. And so, although I crave the idea of being able to professionally connect about my job specifically, there was no other counselor like myself that looked like me. I was able to connect to them in that way, and that felt good. So I found that connection. We found things to talk about. We were both the other woman, one of them was a member of a church. And so we knew similar, our churches were different, but we had those connections as being members of a Black church. And there were even people we knew and had in common. And so there was that connection. So it wasn't a connection where we could say, well, this program we're creating for the students, but yet and still we could connect in that way. Additionally, I had a coworker that was a white woman that was a counselor that I ended up building a very great friendship with, because we could connect professionally, because we had a care and passion for the students. So we found that connection. I wasn't going to talk to her about what shows I watched on the weekend, right? Or the Black church, but the connection I found was a connection in relation to the passion for the students. So we were able to connect there. So if possible, you're going to find and create a support network outside of your place of employment, and then find that inside of that place as well. I always will look for who looks like me. On that first day, we have like a big event, we're preparing for kids to come or students to come. I'm looking around like, who are the new hires? And and I always love everyone, but who looks like me? I'm looking for those connections, or to find that. And know this, just because someone looks like you, it doesn't mean you're going to connect with one another. I'm not saying that, because that doesn't always happen, because personalities have to align as well. And so let's see, we have finding your fit. So This is so important. I know when you go on an interview for a job, you you answer questions because they want to make sure that you are a fit for them, but they also have to be a fit for you. So make sure you're also always doing proper research. What's the work culture before you work anywhere, and make sure it's a proper fit for you. If it doesn't work, consider other possible options. I know that it's not a black and white situation, but it's very important that you just be open to the idea, because you go to work every day. As I stated earlier, with the idea of working while black, we go to work. It's a part of who we are. It's not all of who we are. That's why I want people to not to be caught up on, oh, this is my title at work. I like to look at, what do you do there? What contributions do you have? Like, what do you do? What are you passionate about? I was always passionate about creating programs. I love creating programs. And so, like, I love the kids. So, but that was my passion. So I can't just say I'm a counselor, because that can mean anything. For some people, that's somebody who does great report cards and doesn't talk to the kids. For me, counselor for me, Quanisha Johnson, was programs for the kids, for career, for college, for developing. I love that. So just always looking at, who are you at work? Like, what do you do? So these things are a part of thriving. And so we want to be in a place that supports that. And so if something does not work, just be open to consider other possible options. You don't have to be somewhere. I know we need to be employed, we need to make money, but we need to open up the possibility to be in a place where the culture, where it fits for you, where it works for you, that there are maybe not a lot of people that look like you, but it's an environment that understands it and does the proper training, and the proper support is there for you, and your manager, your supervisor, the company knows and understands what it means to recruit, to hire a diverse workforce, to make sure that your employees that are considered to be the minority in your company are being supported appropriately. That's the environment we want, and that we have the right, remember that word, right, to seek out. So consider that if you are going through this taxing emotional process every day, year after year, that you have to understand and know, for your own mental, your physical health, know when it's time to go. It has to be a fit. Work has to be a fit. You're there all day, advocating for yourself. When you need to speak up when you need to. Every situation does not need to be addressed, but understanding that advocating for yourself, as I stated earlier with the microaggression, being able to utilize that I statement, I feel, I would like. So when you need to speak up, you do so. If there is a matter of harassment, of discrimination, making sure you're speaking up and you're supporting that speech, your speech rather is being supported because you were documenting your interactions. Keep a log. So 2 areas of documentation I want to share with you, because I'm just like writing. I like journaling. I like writing things down. And I always tell my clients how therapeutic writing is, and the importance of getting things down on paper. So if you're dealing with an interaction, or you're in this environment and you're feeling uncomfortable, or you're having uncomfortable interactions, write them down. Write down when they occurred, the date, what was said. And it is measurable and observable information, right? As much as possible, right? Information like 3 times when I walked by this person's desk, they made this comment, right? I said 3 times, and it's observable, something that can be seen, right? So putting that information down. On the other side of it, keeping a log. Sometimes when we're in a place where we're like, where are we going? Are we growing here? Write down your accomplishments and what you've done. Celebrate yourself. Advocate for you, so that when you do, if you decide that place was not a fit, that you have this log of your greatness, of what you achieved, what you accomplished. You are more than a job title, because a job title is different for every person. A doctor is a doctor, but there are certain kind of doctors that provide certain types of things, and you have a different rapport with. And it's the reason why you may have switched from Dr. A to Dr. B. And if we just go title doctor, what does that doctor do? So if you are in any place or any position, write down your accomplishments. Did you create this report? Did you have this wonderful interaction of customer service that like left a customer so happy with your work that you write that down so that like when you're interviewing once again, you're saying, it wasn't that I just did this job, right? That this was my title. These are my accomplishments. This is what I did. So write down. So for two reasons. So that we need to document when something is not appropriate, and we need to present when we're speaking up. We're like, here's the evidence of that. I have been taking this information down, but it's also because we're celebrating ourselves. We're celebrating what we've done, because sometimes when we are working while Black, it is an experience that is exhausting because we are working and we are Black. But it doesn't have to be an experience that's negative. It should be, because the way I show up and how I look, it really has nothing to do with the skills. Because you are hired at that job because you have skills, because you know how to do your job. So just remember that. Practicing self-care, I mentioned it earlier. Every presentation I talk about self-care in some way, I bring it up. Work is such a big part, as I've been stating, of many of our lives, right? You go there, some people work 8-hour days, 10-hour days, some work 7 days a week, 5 days a week, right? So we got to make sure that, like I said earlier, you're paying attention to what you're doing inside of your workplace, but don't let it dominate you, and know what you're doing outside of work. Have a life and be a person outside of your place of employment. Have connections, have a support network, spend time with friends and family, connect with them, do things that you enjoy. Practice all forms of self-care. It's necessary. We're talking about physical, mental, emotional, spiritual self-care. Don't skip anything. Don't skip anything. Because at the end of the day, I often say that if you are working for an environment and you decide that it is not a proper fit, you're being judged, you're being treated, in a way that is not deserving of who you are, and you have to leave, ultimately, they're going to fill your position with someone else. So we have to make sure we're good, because at that work, the production of that product has to happen, whether you're there or not. And that's how they see it. They may miss you because they miss the work you did because you did it well. But ultimately, when you skimp on your care and you don't take care of yourself, especially in these environments where you are doing that mental, that physical taxing work, to go inside because you don't know what microaggression is going to be said, because you don't know if you're going to get that promotion, because you've had experiences there that are uncomfortable. And so ultimately, we have to be prepared, and how we're prepared and how we are hyper vigilant. Like, we're ready. We're not hyper, just vigilant, right? We don't want to be hyper vigilant, is that we taking care of ourselves. When you practice good self-care, it builds your resilience up. You can deal with certain things. So you can decide, this is not for me, so that you can log your accomplishments, so that you can recognize them, so that you can understand when someone is approaching you and talking to you and there's a microaggression here, you know how to advocate for yourself and utilize your I statement. So the more that you practice healthy living and self-care, which is outside of your work environment, because although we're there all the time, a lot of the time, it is not defining who we are, and caring for yourself has to be number one. So now we are at our reflection activity time. So grab your journals, your pens, your pencils, whatever you write with. I love a good journal entry. And so I have a question for you. Have you ever experienced microaggressions at your workplace? I gave you some examples earlier, so now you can reflect. Think about what was said to you. I want you to write this down. What was said to you, or how did someone behave towards you? How did it make you feel, and what was your response? I want you to reflect, do an entry on that. Think about your workplaces. Have you ever experienced any microaggressions in your workplace? And then the next part is, I want you to think about this. What is one word or phrase describing how you desire to feel in your current workplace. How do you want, not how do they make you feel or how do you think they think of you in your workplace right now? What do you want to feel like? Do you want to feel like a boss? Do you want to feel like a queen who knows her job or a king who knows his job? What do you want to feel like? What do you desire to feel like? Because I know microaggressions, how they can make us feel. I know how working while Black, what goes on and what happens when we are in predominant white workspaces and what it can do to us. But I want to channel what we want. What do we want to feel like? What do we want that experience to be? So we have two parts. We're identifying how someone may have given us a feeling of not feeling great, those microaggressions, those insults, those slights. But then on the other end, I want to end this prompt with just, what are you desiring to feel? So in spite of what they said to me, what am I desiring to feel in this workplace? What do I want out of it? So I just want you to just take some reflection time and think about that. And then just have that experience. And, you know, I love journaling. So these reflections often are very, very helpful to us all. So we are at the end of our time. I thank you very much for listening to me today as we discuss working while Black. And as I always say, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and be well. Bye-bye.